Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. We have reviewed a lot of albums on this YouTube channel. Velocities in Music as a whole has reviewed almost upwards of 700 albums at this point in the past 4 years.
Yes.
Tom, I think on at least half of these albums you've go, oh, this sounds like Sunny Day Real Estate.
Yeah!
I'm pretty sure half the albums we review sound like Sunny Day Real
They're
Estate.
like the stem cell of all 2000s rock.
You know, that's a really good point. Now, the album we're going to review today really sounds like some Sunny Day Real Estate. And that album is Touche Amore's third album is Survived By. Touche Amore is an American post-hardcore band. Post-hardcore. Before reviewing music, I didn't know what that meant. Post-hardcore is what I would originally have called metal, but it has just a punk. It has a punk edge and a lot of kind of screamy / emo sort of vocals and lyrics. And Touche Amore definitely fits that bill.
Yep.
Very much to a T, I would say. Like there are a lot of expansive guitar work on this album, distorted, gritty guitar, and distorted, gritty vocalist. The vocalist is yelling throughout most of this album. And I gotta say, at first, that was a major barrier for me, as it usually is. Vocals are something that I evaluate pretty heavily, because if you're going to use it in music, you need to make sure that your vocals are always adding value, and I didn't always at first felt like this vocalist is always adding value. Now, to go on with the sound, they have a very expansive arrangement, I'd say. They really don't follow any set structure or formula. It's very experimental in its structure and nature and how they put the songs together, and how they put the album together. Now, Tom, you're a big rock fanatic.
Yeah.
You're the expert I go to when I need to know anything about rock music.
Okay.
So, is Survived By, how does it measure up?
I think it measures up really well in style and just general content and execution from that aspect. Now, that's a very, very general statement.
Yeah,
so
could you be more vague?
I'll get into a little bit more specifics here. So, coming into this band, you mentioned that there isn't a lot of structure. Very true. It's very experimental. Yeah. And along with that, it's, the vocals, it's not as much focus on melody. It's more that shouting.
Yeah, in rhythm.
Those are the two, to me, biggest indicators that an album is going to take a lot of listens and be hard to get into at first.
Not a lot
because
of hooks.
No hooks. You don't have those vocal melodies to latch onto, and you don't even really have instrumental melodies to catch onto at first because there's not enough repetition of any of those sections to really latch onto it. So I think that if you are into this style, right off the bat, I'm going to tell you that you're going to want to listen to this a few times. Luckily, that's a pretty easy thing to do because I think this album is, maybe right around 30 minutes?
Yeah, it's not a long album at all.
It's a pretty short album, but what they, it's because they don't have that excess repetition. It's because they're throwing an idea at you and moving on to something else. But they do a lot of theming, both lyrically and also with the guitar motifs and lines that'll recur throughout different songs in the album. So you'll hear something that you think, I think I heard that 1 or 2 tracks ago, and it helps to kind of tie everything together. Now the instrumental execution to me is really key as well, because this is, as we said, a post-hardcore album. It's got elements of punk, elements of metal, but while it always feels intense to me, it never is quite like super heavy. I mean, in the sense that like Master of Puppets gets heavy, or in the sense that like Glassjaw's Worship and Tribute gets heavy. What?
You're sure you're wearing Master of Puppets?
I know. That's why I just referenced it.
Oh, nice.
Well, maybe you didn't see, but I did a little one of these.
Oh.
I'm not just trying to cool myself off here. I'm referencing the shirt. But I mean, what I mean by that, getting back to my point, is that the guitars are never super thick. They're a little more clangy. They focus on those full chords with the high notes in there as well to get a little bit of the harmony behind the instrumentals. They're never just chugging along with those like typical kind of metal triplet run rhythms that you hear. So from that, it already gives you a little bit more intrigue. And that's where you kind of feel a little bit of an indie vibe, like bands like Sunny Day Real Estate, even like Modest Mouse or Built to Spill, with some of the lead guitar lines. But then they definitely will rock out a bit. Yeah. Now, though, if I had to give one complaint to this album, is that while the vocals, in the screaming vocals, I think they're well done for what they are, but I don't think that they always fit, especially since this album is quite dynamic. You have several moments where it comes down in volume a bit, and it starts to feel a little more sentimental, and the guitar work is just gorgeous, and then it's still kind of screaming at you.
I absolutely agree, and actually I'm going to tackle on, because I think that we have similar criticisms of this album, but we approach it from different angles. So to me, like, I always thought this album, the volume aspect of this album always felt like a 10 out of 10 to me.
Okay.
They could have rocked out just slightly harder, but I feel like this is pretty much as loud as it gets throughout most of the album. I say 80% of the album, and then the other 20% when they actually do try to play quieter parts, more softer written parts. The vocalist is still screaming. It's like he doesn't know how to either scream quieter or whisper or sing. He doesn't know how to do any of those things. And to me, that's where this album really kind of loses a little bit of its strategic advantages, because while these guys are great songwriters, they could have embraced dynamics a lot more to make the highs higher and to make the lows lower. And that is the key. I'm telling you, for all the music we listen to, that is the one thing that makes tracks that don't focus on vocal hooks or hooks in general memorable is dynamics. You have to have dynamic contrast.
And it's all about unity between every aspect of the sound when it comes to those dynamics. If the instrumentals are going low a little bit, I don't expect the vocals to match. And there's just such a miscommunication and disparity there that it doesn't feel like things quite click in those moments.
And it's in those moments, it's in those quieter moments where the vocalist is still screaming that I detest his vocals. His vocals. Otherwise, I think that his vocals actually they grew on me, and I felt like the way that it worked with like the distortion of those guitar chords Tom was talking about. Even the drumming on this album is actually fantastic. I mean, the drummer's spastic. He's all over the place. Uses a lot of cymbals. That's what I want to see. Obviously, this guy played jazz at some point in his life. I mean, the cymbals, the way that the cymbals mesh with the vocals, I just feel like it just has this overall aura of just grit and grind. That really, it's an iconic sort of post-hardcore sound that they just pulled it off really well. It's those quieter parts, the parts where they're referencing and channeling bands like Sunny Day Real Estate, Brand New. I mean, oh man, so many moments on this album. It's like, man, I really want to listen to The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me, right? And even Modest Mouse at times, which all of those bands, have that Sunny Day Real Estate sort of foundation. But I gotta say that it suffered in those lower parts. Now that's just a minor criticism, because what this band does in the first 4 tracks is just enough to just knock me off my feet. The first 2 tracks just exist to write content. Those 2 tracks flow seamlessly together. It's like one big 5-minute track. And then tracks 3 and 4 work well together. There's a number of tracks on this album that they're like almost like pairs. Like they work together. They're meant to be in that certain order. They definitely crafted this to be an album listen, a fluid album listening experience. And that's something I give these guys a lot of credit for. Also, their forward thinking and how they constructed the songs, I think is fantastic. It's something that a lot of post-hardcore bands fall into, is just falling into these formulas. And I like to see bands reach and experiment outside of that box.
And especially, I want to get back to the albumization real quick and the flow of the album, because I think that for the post-hardcore genre works a lot better than just kind of a song-by-song blitz. Now, on albums like Worship and Tribute, it works a little bit better that way because they're throwing so much variety in there. But here, where you have ideas kind of recurring throughout the album, and you have a very generally focused sound. It's very specific. They're not going all over the place stylistically. It helps to have that flow because it makes it much easier to digest, and you feel like it's one cohesive unit. It justifies the almost like strict focus on the sound a lot more.
Yeah, that's a good point. Tom, what are you going on this one?
I'm going 77.
Okay, we're actually quite significantly apart based on our scoring system. I'm at an 82, so 77 to 82, you might say, well, that's only 5 points apart. Au contraire, mon frère, that is actually very far apart on our scale. So we actually kind of disagree on this. I think this album it kind of hit me on the 6th or 7th listen that this is just a really solid record. And every time that I play it, I find myself just getting knocked off my feet about how these guys are putting these songs together. The only thing keeping it out of the upper 80s and even maybe around the 90 mark is the dynamic contrast issue I talked about earlier. What did you guys think about the third album from Touche Amore, Is Survived By? Please give us a comment. Let us know what your experiences and thoughts were, and if this was as polarizing. It was kind of polarizing to us.
Yeah.
But if you guys had a different experience, we'd love to hear about it. Let us know at www.velocitiesofmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesofmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. Let us know what albums from 2013 or any time in the past you'd like to see us review on this YouTube channel. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.
You can call this coming clean, or the repeat of what you know.